Rise and shine, Bobcats.
You're tuned into the Bobcat Buzz, where the news is perfectly wild.
And always a roaring good time.
Today is January 24th, and it'll be sunny with a high of 34 degrees.
Today's lunch choices are spaghetti or popcorn chicken. Have a good lunch.
This month's key is this is it. Stay in the moment and stay positive.
Please pause for a moment of silence.
Okay.
Now it's time for the pledge.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now a word from our principal.
Hello. Cafeteria expectations. Yeah, very important stuff. We expect in the cafeteria for you to stay in your seat, okay? For you to talk to the kids at your table, okay? Not the kids behind you and not the kids way over there. And very important, we expect no running in the cafeteria. Today we're at the kindergarten lunch to make sure that these kids are following the expectations. Sound good? Talk to you later. Ring, ring. Ring, ring. Calling Zayden. Calling old Starksy. Ring, ring.
Hi, Kingston. Hi. What did you pack for lunch? A sandwich and chips and fruit. Do you like your lunch? No. Oh. Well, I mean, yes. Do you like your lunch? Yeah. What do you like about lunch? Who are you talking to? Going outside. You like going outside at lunch? Yeah. Okay.
Hello, what's your name?
Ivy.
That's such a pretty name. So, did you pack or buy your lunch today?
Mommy packed.
What'd she pack you?
Some hot Takis and I don't know. We're eating spicy stuff. Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about your lunch?
I like that it says Nike.
Oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
So do you like sitting
With your friends at lunch?
Yeah.
All right, thanks for doing an interview with us.
I got my friend here, Miss Salas. What'd you bring for lunch, Miss Salas?
Actually, I have fish, but it's in my classroom.
Oh, she eats lunch later because she's got some kids held hostage over here. She's busy. Who you got with? Who do we have with us?
Well, I got my friend Lucas, Mateo, Miriam, Lincoln, Seamus,
Okay, Seamus.
and Nash.
And of course me.
Hey, over here we got everybody who's anybody over here, don't we? Don't we, Miriam? Hey, thanks for talking with us on the Bobcat Buzz.
This week's book rec is called Restart. It's about a boy who fell off a roof and he lost all his memories. He's trying to figure out who he was and if he can change his behavior by not liking the person that he was and know what other people thought about him. Check it out in the library. I recommend it for 4th and 5th grade.
It's Bobcat comedy time. Hey, Brandon.
Hi, Liam.
How was the snow globe feeling in January?
How?
A little shaken. Check out this Bobcat beat. It's time for the Fluency Friday Challenge. We'll have 3 winners from 3 grades. First, second, and third. For first grade, our winner is going to be Maddie. For second grade, our winner is going to be Jaime Garcia. For third grade, our winner is going to be Angelo. Make sure to come to the library and get your book vending machine coins. Make sure to turn your sheets in for next week. Bye.
Hey everybody, I hope you are as excited as I am about our One Book Blitz book for 2025 because of Winn-Dixie. I have to confess, guys, this is one of my favorite books of all time, so I'm super excited about it. And right now, we're going to read chapters 1 and 2 together. Are you ready? Here we go. Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo. Chapter 1. My name is India Opal Baloney, and last summer, my daddy, the preacher, sent me to the store for a box of macaroni and cheese, some white rice, and 2 tomatoes. And I came back with a dog. This is what happened. I walked into the produce section of the Winn-Dixie grocery store to pick out my 2 tomatoes, and I almost bumped right into the store manager. He was standing there all red-faced and screaming and waving his arms around. "Who let a dog in here?" he kept on shouting. "Who let a dirty dog in here?" At first, I didn't see a dog. There were just a lot of vegetables rolling around on the floor, tomatoes and onions and green peppers, and there was what seemed like a whole army of Winn-Dixie employees running around waving their arms just the same way the store manager was waving his. And then the dog came running around the corner. He was a big dog and ugly. And he looked like he was having a real good time. His tongue was hanging out and he was wagging his tail. He skidded to a stop and smiled right at me. I had never before in my life seen a dog smile, but that's what he did. He pulled back his lips and showed me all his teeth. Then he wagged his tail so hard that he knocked some oranges off a display, and they went rolling everywhere, mixing in with the tomatoes and onions and green peppers. The manager screamed, "Somebody grab that dog!" The dog went running over to the manager, wagging his tail and smiling. He stood up on his hind legs. You could tell that he wanted to do was get face to face with the manager and thank him for the good time he was having in the produce department. But somehow he ended up knocking the manager over. And the manager must have been having a bad day, because lying there on the floor right in front of everybody, he started to cry. The dog leaned over him, real concerned, and licked his face. "Please," the manager said, "somebody call the pound." "Wait a minute," I hollered. "That's my dog. Don't call the pound." All the Winn-Dixie employees turned around and looked at me. And I knew I had done something big, and maybe stupid too. But I couldn't help it. I couldn't let that dog go to the pound. "Here, boy," I said. The dog stopped licking the manager's face and put his ears up in the air and looked at me, like he was trying to remember where he knew me from. "Here, boy," I said. And then I figured out that the dog was probably just like everybody else in the world, and that he didn't want to get called, and that he would want to get called by a name. Only I didn't know what his name was, so I just said the first thing that came into my head. I said, "Here, Winn-Dixie." And that dog came trotting over to me just like he had been doing it all his whole life. The manager sat up and gave me a hard stare, like maybe I was making fun of him. "It's his name," I said, "honest." The manager said, "Don't you know not to bring a dog into the grocery store?" "Yes, sir," I told him. "He got in by mistake. I'm sorry. It won't happen again." "Come on, Winn-Dixie," I said to the dog. I started walking, and he followed along behind me as I went out of the produce department and down the cereal aisle and past all the cashiers and out the door. Once we were safe outside, I checked him over real careful, and he didn't look that good. He was big, but skinny. You could see his ribs, and there were bald patches all over him, places where he didn't have any fur at all. Mostly, he looked like a big piece of old brown carpet that had been left out in the rain. "You're a mess," I told him. "I bet you don't belong to anybody." He smiled at me. He did that thing again where he pulled back his lips and showed me his teeth. He smiled so big that it made him sneeze. It was like he was saying, "I know I'm a mess. Isn't it funny?" It's hard not to immediately fall in love with a dog who has a good sense of humor. "Come on," I told him. "Let's see what the preacher has to say about you." And the two of us, me and Winn-Dixie, started walking home. Chapter 2. That summer I found Winn-Dixie was also the summer me and the preacher moved to Naomi, Florida, so he could be the new preacher at the Open Arms Baptist Church of Naomi. My daddy is a good preacher and a nice man, but sometimes it's hard for me to think about him as my daddy because he spends so much time preaching or thinking about preaching or getting ready to preach. And so in my mind, I think of him as the preacher. Before I was born, he was a missionary in India, and that's how I got my first name. But he calls me by my second name, Opal, because that was his mother's name, and he loved her a lot. Anyway, while me and Winn-Dixie walked home, I told him how I got my name, and I told him how I had just moved to Naomi. I also told him about the preacher and how he was a good man, and if he was too distracted with sermons and prayers and suffering people to go grocery shopping. But you know what? I told Winn-Dixie, you are a suffering dog, so maybe he will take to you right away. Maybe he'll let me keep you. Winn-Dixie looked up at me and wagged his tail. He was kind of limping like something was wrong with one of his legs. And I have to admit, he stunk bad. He was an ugly dog, but already I loved him with all my heart. When we got to the Friendly Corners trailer park, I told Winn-Dixie that he had to behave right and be quiet because this is an all-adult trailer park. And the only reason I got to live in it was because the preacher was a preacher and I was a good, quiet kid. I was what the Friendly Corners trailer park manager, Mr. Alfred, called an exception. And I told Winn-Dixie he had to act like an exception too. Specifically, I told him not to pick any fights with Mr. Alfred's cats or Mrs. Detweller's little yappy Yorkie dog Samuel. Winn-Dixie looked up at me while I was telling him everything, and I swear he understood. Sit, I told him when we got to my trailer. He sat right down. He had good manners. Stay here, I told him. I'll be right back. The preacher was sitting in the living room, working at the little fold-out table. He had papers spread all around him and he was rubbing his nose, which always means he's thinking hard. Daddy? I said. He said back. Daddy, do you know how you always tell me that we should help those less fortunate than ourselves? He said. He rubbed his nose and he looked around at his papers. Well, I said, I found a less fortunate at the grocery store. Is that right? He said. Yes, sir, I told him. I stared at Preacher really hard. Sometimes he reminded me of a turtle hiding inside his shell, in there thinking about things and not ever sticking his head out into the world. Daddy, I was wondering, could this less fortunate, could he stay with us for a while? Finally, the preacher looked up at me. Opal, he said, what are you talking about? I found a dog, I told him, and I want to keep him. No dogs, the preacher said. We've talked about this before. You don't need a dog. I know it, I said. I know I don't need a dog, but this dog needs me. Look, I said. I went to the trailer door and I hollered, Winn-Dixie! Winn-Dixie's ears shot up in the air and he grinned and sneezed. And then he came limping up the steps and into the trailer and put his head right in the preacher's lap, right on top of a pile of papers. The preacher looked at Winn-Dixie. He looked at his ribs and his matted up fur and the places where he was bald. The preacher's nose wrinkled up. Like I said, the dog smelled pretty bad. Winn-Dixie looked up at the preacher. He pulled back his lips and showed the preacher all of his crooked yellow teeth, and he wagged his tail and knocked some of the preacher's papers off the table. Then he sneezed, and some more of the papers fluttered off to the floor. What did you call this dog? The preacher asked. Winn-Dixie, I whispered. I was afraid to say anything too loud. I could see that Winn-Dixie was having a good effect on the preacher. He was making him poke his head out of his shell. Well, said the preacher, he's a stray, if I've ever seen one. He put down his pencil and scratched Winn-Dixie behind the ears. And a less fortunate, too, that's for sure. Are you looking for a home? The preacher asked, real soft to Winn-Dixie. Winn-Dixie wagged his tail. Well, the preacher said, I guess you found one. And that's the end of chapter 2. I hope you guys have a great time reading this story. Have a great rest of your day.
Check out some clips from this week.
that's the buzz for today, Bobcats.
This is the intro.
Wait, this
Oh,
intro.
wait, yeah, I forgot.
Today's.
Hey, Brandon.
Hi, Liam.
How was the snow globe feeling in January?
A little snowy?
That's the buzz for today, Bobcats.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
And remember,
Stay wild and wonderful.
have a great Friday.